Joining us now is Executive Director of Advocates for Trans Equality, Rodrigo Heng-Lehtinen. Sorry about that, Rodrigo. I totally butchered your name. I apologize, but thank you for joining us today.
No worries. It's a tough one, but thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for taking time out. Can you tell our listeners out there a little bit about the history of Advocates for Trans Equality?
Sure. So Advocates for Trans Equality is a new organization born out of the merger of two other groups who people may know, National Center for Transgender Equality, or NCTE, and TILDEF, which is Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. And the whole idea was that there is power in numbers.
Yes.
We figured we could get a lot more done and get way better results for trans people if we combined. So we put our two organizations under the same roof, and now we are A4TE.
I love that. And I totally believe in strength in numbers. Can you give us a little bit of the mission of the newly formed, like when you take these two organizations, squish them together, what is the mission, the driving force of Advocates for Trans Equality?
Absolutely. What A4TE is all about is building trans people's political power and winning rights and representation for all transgender people. At Advocates for Trans Equality, we fight for our legal and political rights. And, you know, we do that not just for trans people ourselves, but for our families and everyone who cares about us. So we're out there in the courts with litigation. We're out there under the dome working in Congress and in the halls of state legislatures to fight back against anti-trans bills. And we're doing whatever it takes to make sure that our community can get the rights and protections that we all deserve.
And we thank you for that, Rodrigo. We thank you for that. So along with the legal work, do you work with any candidates, like folks from the community who are considering running for office?
Yeah, definitely. One of the most unique things that we do is help trans people running for office and also help trans people vote. You know, at the end of the day, we're only going to be able to win the rights and protections in the government if we also have some influence on who gets elected to office in the first place. Elections are so critical. So, you know, we work really closely with trans people running for office, and it is so exciting that there are more trans people running all the time. You know, we're, as a community, facing all these attacks. Absolutely. We're under attack in state legislatures with anti-trans bills and in the streets, facing so much hostility and harassment. But trans people are fighting back. And every single election cycle, we see more trans people running for office. And this time, there are over a dozen openly trans candidates running for office this election day. You know, you said the election's in 9 days. There are trans people running for office in Florida, in Indiana, in Hawaii, literally all over the country, in red areas, purple areas, blue areas. I mean, trans people are everywhere, and we are running for office at more rates all the time.
Well, that's good to know because, as you know, Rodrigo, the Republican platform has been an all-out war on trans rights in this country and trans people. It's absolutely sickening to hear the rhetoric about kids going to school, a girl, and coming back a boy, this fear-laden nonsense coming out of them. Is it taking hold with anybody? Is it making it a lot harder for our trans candidates, or are people not buying into it? What's your feeling on it?
Well, every time that our community comes under attack like this, trans people then mobilize and actually get more involved. So I think that these MAGA extremist-driven hostility against trans people is actually encouraging trans people and the people who care about us, like our families, to get a lot more involved. So it's ultimately going to be a backlash on them, I think. And of course, in the short run, it's really dangerous because in the immediate term, this kind of rhetoric encourages harassment and discrimination against us as a small minority. But in the long run, it actually inspires more of us to get involved. I mean, one of the things we do at Advocates for Trans Equality is the U.S. Transgender Survey. It's this enormous survey, literally the largest study by and for trans people about our experiences. And we found that trans people in our survey registered to vote at higher rates than the average American, and turned out to vote at higher rates than the average American in the 2020 elections. So I think when the MAGA extremists attack us like this, they are waking up a sleeping giant.
I'm glad you're saying that, because every time I hear it, there are more trans people have come out in the last, every year. There's more and more people being who they're living their authentic self. And every time I hear this, I think, political parties, families of trans people are of all political parties. And every time they come out and say this horrible rhetoric, there are families that may be Republicans saying, wow, I've got a son, I've got a daughter, I got a brother, I got a cousin, nephew. They're tearing this person down, and hopefully it's having a reverse effect and not creating fear, but having a fear of the Republicans actually taking office. So I'm glad to hear you think more people are mobilizing because of this, and it's not keeping people down. So keep it's sad though that this kind of war is going on against wonderful people that are just trying to live their authentic lives. But thank God for you guys.
Well, thank you. And you're absolutely right that trans people are everywhere, and including from conservative homes. I mean, my family are lifelong Republicans. I'm not Republican, but all of them are. Right. And when I came out as transgender, they didn't really understand what it meant. They didn't have any kind of familiarity with what it meant to be trans, and I don't blame them for that. I think that's common. It's totally normal to have questions. But thankfully, over time, they came to accept me, and they are still Republican. They are lifelong conservatives, and they don't see any contradiction with that, because they are like, what I care about is freedom. And the old Republican Party used to be about freedom, so that's what they were about. Now, of course, MAGA extremists have taken a hold of the party and are trying to vilify everyday Americans who happen to be trans or who happen to be immigrants or other misunderstood minorities.
Just fill in the blank.
They do that for their own gain. Yeah, but there's a lot of old school Republicans out there who are supportive of their transgender neighbors when they take the time to get to know them.
Do you think they're supportive enough to not vote for the Republican candidate this year?
Yeah, it's possible. We're seeing so many Republicans come out and endorse Kamala Harris because they are these old school Republicans who believe in freedom.
Right on.
And they recognize that Trump doesn't believe in anything.
No.
He just wants to protect himself.
He believes in his own power.
Person.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
Exactly.
So, Rodrigo, I know that you are, we've kind of alluded to this, but can you just remind our listeners what exactly is at stake for the trans community in particular this election cycle? This whole Project 2025 thing is terrifying. Can you remind folks out there what is at stake for folks?
Well, the stakes are extremely high. On the one side, you have Trump with, as you said, Project 2025, which is essentially a plan to seize power and to gain their own control, MAGA extremists' own control, by attacking minorities, whether that's trans people or immigrants, or really, I would say, all LGBTQ people. We know that when Trump was president last time, he attacked trans people. Almost every single federal agency issued some kind of rules and regulations against trans people. But now we see Project 2025, the plan for the future. It goes even further. So there's extreme fear among trans people in our families about what another Trump presidency would mean. And then on the other hand, you have Harris, who has been such a champion for our community. I mean, for trans people and all LGBT people. She famously officiated same-sex weddings when that was way more stigmatized than it is today. And she also, a lot of people don't realize, she was a huge advocate for listing the panic defense. That is this terrible rule, that if you murder or physically attack a queer or trans person, you could say, oh, well, I freaked out. I got really nervous and overwhelmed when I learned that they were gay or they were trans, and that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of courts would allow that, would give a lower sentence
look,
because of
right
that.
here in Illinois.
And Kamala Harris fought against that.
Yes,
she most certainly did. Yeah, right here in Illinois, it wasn't officially off the books until 2019. You know, like let that sink in. Like it's just. We have made such huge strides as a community, but without having these people who are there to like take down these weird laws like the panic defense thing. That one's always gets me. So, which brings us to y'all are having a virtual rally tomorrow for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, we would love to invite everyone to come. We're doing a virtual rally tomorrow, so Monday evening, 6 p.m. Central Time. And it's online, so you can come no matter where you are. And it's going to be really exciting. We're going to be given resources to make it easier to vote. We have these really simple tools to check your registration. And we got great speakers, a lot of openly trans elected officials. So people like Andrea Jenkins, who's the first Black trans woman to ever be elected to public office in the United States of America. And she's also a board member of ours. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea.
and Danica Rome, who's the first openly trans person elected to the state Senate in Virginia, and Zoe Zephyr, openly trans woman elected in Montana. So like I said, trans people are everywhere. And we've got these trans leaders who are all supporting Harris Walz, turning our community out and encouraging people to cast their ballots. So yeah, you can, if you want to come to the virtual rally, you can check us out online. We're at Trans Equality or Trans Equality Now on all our social media. The more the merrier.
Yeah, and let me again, Harris and Walz, they walk the walk, not just talk the talk. I know in Minnesota there's openly trans legislature. Her name is escaping me. It's Leahy, I believe is her last.
Lee Finke.
Lee Finke. Yes. You know, these are people that like want to raise up all Americans. They want to bring us all up and provide opportunities. And when we elect people like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, or we elect trans candidates or candidates from the LGBTQ community, they're going to be there fighting for our rights, fighting for our basic rights. And this is something people need to keep into their little tiny brains as they're heading up to that. Where is it? I know the whole the Harris Walz virtual rally is going to be virtual, but is there headquartered in a certain place? Like, will folks actually be in the same space, or is everybody just chiming in from across the country?
It's all on Zoom, so it's entirely virtual because, you know, our staff and our team are all over the country. We're in a remote environment, so yeah, it is all on Zoom. And again, 6 p.m. Central Time tomorrow evening.
There we are. And if you want to find out more about the work of advocates for trans equality, or just to register for the rally, go to the rally, go to transequality.org. And most importantly, make sure you get out there and vote. Rodrigo Heng-Lehtinen, thank you so much for taking time out today. Thank you for the tireless work you all do for our trans siblings. And have a great rally tomorrow.
Thanks so much. I just want to do one last plug. If people need to figure out their polling place, go to transformthevote.org. That's another resource we have, especially for trans people voting, but it goes to anyone because early voting is happening in a ton of places. You don't have to wait until Election Day to vote.
Absolutely.
Election Day is the last day to vote, not the only one. So check out transformthevote.org.
Beautiful.
I love
Thanks, Rodrigo.
that.
Really appreciate you.